A chance to start joining us. All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Good morning, everyone, and thanks for joining us for this Friday edition of the Restart Kentucky webinar series. It's presented by the Kentucky Chamber of Commerce and the Kentucky Community and Technical College System. And today's topic is restaurants and retail responding to the reopening. I'm John Cox with the Kentucky Chamber, and I'm here to introduce our panelists. So with us today, we have Stacy Roof of the Kentucky Restaurant Association, Winston Griffin of Laurel Grocery in Kentucky, and he's also our Kentucky Chamber Chair-elect, Tod Griffin from the Kentucky Retail Federation, and Kyle Zimmerman from Carson's Food and Drink. And moderating today's discussion will be Kaylin Query of Lexington Event Company and a very active member of the Chamber as well. So welcome and thanks for joining us.
John, thanks for having us, and thanks to the sponsors. You know, the Chamber has done a great job of setting up these webinars and keeping everyone informed since the pandemic started. And as a business owner, we appreciate the information and the constant connection to, you know, updates on what's happening. So thank you all. So we'll get started. We'll kick things off, and we'll start with the retail sector. You know, businesses have been forced to close and business has changed. Tod, tell us a little bit about the retail industry and how businesses are managing under the current reopening plan and schedule.
Yeah, thank you, Kaylin. Thanks for the opportunity to be on this morning. You know, retail and certainly restaurant industry has been two of the industries most impacted by the pandemic. Retail is kind of been a two-headed horse, so to speak, during all this. In that we did have some retailers, obviously, that were deemed necessary and were able to remain open. Grocery stores being probably the most important one of those, as we all like to eat. And then we also had others such as pharmacies, home improvement stores, farm supply stores, and a few others. So, you know, while those continued to operate and tried to navigate the pandemic, and as the crisis started hitting and businesses started shutting down, schools were closed, daycare centers were closed, the Healthy at Home initiative was enacted by the governor. At the same time, we had a lot of retailers that were forced to close their doors temporarily, and the impact was devastating for those folks. A lot of small independent mom and pop stores, a lot of soft goods stores in particular that were deemed non-essential, and they were shocked, obviously, through this. The bright spot, I guess, if you could call it a bright spot, was that Governor Beshear did allow those stores impacted to still do curbside and delivery, which a lot of our surrounding states and states across the nation were not allowed to do. They were completely shut down. So, you know, some stores did get creative. For those that were sitting on the sidelines and waiting to do some online activity, they really ramped that up very quickly. They used their social media channels and really got creative and sold gift cards and were at least able to operate on a shoestring budget, if nothing else. As far as the reopening, you know, we were very excited to hear the May 20th reopening for retail. And it's been interesting to see the reopening. You know, a lot of the retailers have done a nice job of really thinking through the process of how to keep not only their store associates safe, but how to keep consumers safe and how to really maintain that confidence and that trust in their customers that they would have a safe environment to go back and shop in. So, and then not all retailers have reopened. You know, some are still kind of taking a wait and see approach. Kind of seeing how this plays out. And for some of them, it's an economic decision as well. You know, at a 33% capacity for some stores, it's just not worth it economically to go back in. So that's kind of where we're at. But overall, we're really pleased. I think consumer confidence is growing. A couple of studies I've seen this week indicate that 50 or 60% of consumers now are willing to go back into stores and start shopping. I noticed that the Gen Z generation seems to be leading the charge on that, and really wanting to spend some money back in some of our favorite retail stores across the state.
That's great. Winston, as a wholesale provider to various grocery and retail establishments, I'm sure it was challenging for your company during the early weeks of the pandemic. Did you see business pick up as people stocked up, and what were some of your biggest challenges early on?
Well, the only word I can use is crazy. It was absolutely crazy in the food sector, the retail grocery sector when this all started. So we are one of the few sectors that was deemed essential and was allowed to stay open due to the food supply chain and trying to keep things steady. So yes, early on it was chaotic. There was a lot of panic buying, and that has settled in now. But early on, it was just a matter of trying to get product to the retail outlets. And there was a point where customers would call and just say, whatever you have, send it, because I don't want to go through the process of ordering and finding out you're out of things. So it was chaotic, to say the least. Now we're to the point of things have settled down. There's no longer a lot of hoarding of toilet paper going on, thank goodness. But
Thank goodness.
and I'm still not exactly sure how that all started. But now you have supply chain issues. Let's say a meat processing facility shuts down because some of their employees have been diagnosed with this illness. Well, they have to shut down and clean, and that causes an issue in itself. But then when they reopen, they're doing their best to reopen with social distancing. And there are many, many factories that are not laid out to have all employees 6 feet apart. So by definition, their output decreases. And to what level, we don't really know. But now that is the issue, that we cannot get a lot of product just because the has been lessened. And also there's a lot, as you will see at the grocery store, there are a lot of items that you have not seen in a long time. And that's simply because the manufacturer is not making them at the moment. They are trying to be as efficient as possible, which means reducing the number of items that they produce and producing only those items as fast as they can. So when you might have seen 10 different varieties of bleach by one manufacturer, for example, now there are only 2. And they are doing that to try to be efficient and just make the product as fast as they can. And so we don't know ourselves as a wholesaler exactly what we're going to receive, just as some of our customers don't. So it's been a very challenging time. We have been fortunate in that we have stayed open, but I'm glad that things have calmed down a little bit, and the buying patterns have settled in. So I think we're getting a lot closer to normal, but we're certainly not there yet.
So moving to the restaurant industry, the event industry has not been reopened. We're not on any phase yet. We've not been mentioned. And so we watch the restaurant industry the closest because they're probably the most similar, and we're excited to see that they are part of the phases of reopening. Stacy, can you talk a little bit about the scope of the impact of the pandemic and your thoughts on how the restaurant industry is faring?
Sure. So, like Winston said, it's just in Tod. It's been a lot of just running interference and triage, I guess, especially early on. We didn't think we would be closed. Within 24 hours, we got all kinds of messages, and then bam, we're closed. And so operators, it meant trying to figure out, if we have no carry out or delivery business to speak of, you can't just build that overnight. You've got to have things, intact. So some of them had to go down that road. Some of them decided, I'm just going to close and I'm going to see what happens and how long. And some are still closed. And so really it's all over the place. Others, especially those with drive-throughs, have fared pretty well because their drive-through allows and is already, in customers' minds as an option, right? So they've been, I think they've fared the best over the past 3 months or so out of every segment in the industry. But so when we're a normal year and we are operating at normal capacity in any given year, it's about a 200,000 employee business in just Kentucky in restaurants, and it's about a $9 billion in revenue hit for the state, right? So it's estimated in April that we lost just in restaurants about $550 million in revenue. Of course, 1st of May is Derby time, and a lot of areas of the state benefit from that. But that's not factored into that $550 million price tag. And so just like Winston was saying, supply, as we come back and we're allowed to operate at 33%, there are operators that still are not open and have chosen to wait and see, how things shake out. Some that are smaller especially think that 33% gives them almost nothing. If you have 50 seats, getting 14 or 15 seats doesn't make it worthwhile to turn the lights on and to bring the staff back. There are all kinds of issues around the SBA loans and those requirements. And while some of that's been taken care of in Congress's actions in the past week, for a lot of operators, it doesn't help them because with that 8-week window that they had to spend on the PPP loan, for instance, a lot of them are at the end of that 8 weeks and have already, because they had to spend it 75% on their payroll, bring people back. And they felt like they didn't have really a choice but to open at that limited capacity and to start to, operate and continue with the curbside and carry out delivery and all the other mechanisms that they came up with. But it's been a huge hit. And, and with childcare still not open, it's even tougher for families that have children at home. And with NTI, the instruction at home for a lot of the schools, which is now over. But if you're getting called back to work, but you have children at home that an adult has to be with, it's kind of tough to go back to work. And so all these different factors at play. But I think that our operators are very resilient. They're very creative. We've seen a lot of unintended good, come out of things and things that they can use. And a lot of them have said, you don't usually have time to sit down and think, more than, 10 minutes about what I might want to do to my menu or how I might want to change my staff around or, what kind of training would we do if we had the time other than what we always do? So I think those things are good. And we'll continue to see that kind of evolve. But 33% is not very helpful for most of our members. And so they're anxious for that to go. But with social distancing, increasing the capacity without lessening the social distancing requirement can only get you so far, right? Because if the tables still have to be spaced 6 feet apart, then most operators are only going to be able to get to 50, maybe 60% capacity, depending on their size, inside before, it doesn't matter if we're at 75% because the distancing doesn't permit them to use their tables in a way that would increase that capacity. So a lot of things at play, but for the most part, I think they've done a great job of really changing their models and evaluating what's going to work. And, it's the hospitality industry. They just want to see customers in their dining rooms. It's sad when you walk into a dining room and it's dark,
Well, and I will say I've visited several restaurants in Central Kentucky and Louisville, and those that are open have done a great job with temperature taking and sanitizing and spacing and all of that. So kudos to them. And one of those restaurants is Carson's, which I know Ashley visited as her first restaurant. I've been there, and they have done some creative things with their patio. Kyle, you're the general manager of this popular restaurant in Lexington. How's the reopening process impacted you, and what's been the biggest challenge?
No, it's been really interesting. I guess we'll call it fun, to say the least. Going from, for those who have been to Carson's, we're all about the hospitality and enjoying your time in there. And we went from Sunday night to the Monday when they announced the shutdown to switching all to goes. And for people that have never worked in the restaurants, been in the scene, it's a big challenge to go from dine-in only for the most part at 98% of your business to 100% is all curbside, all to go. So it was a major challenge to kind of switch that all over, which we did. And then fast forward to 3 months, we're at 33%, but also a big majority of our sales right now are still to goes and curbside. So trying to be that restaurant that has the hospitality that you are at 33%, which is still, busy for us, but also on the other end, trying to keep up with to goes and make shifting your kitchen to do half and half. It's difficult. We have a really good kitchen. We have an amazing staff that has bent over backwards and has done everything on the drop of a hat. We're pretty much just waiting for the word to switch it to either 50% or full capacity, but we've been kind of just waiting and switching our game plan. And, I think the biggest challenge for us so far is one, switching the kitchen, but it's distribution. We sell a lot of steaks, a lot of burgers, a lot of cocktails, and everything from in between. It's a lot of people just can't get us what we need. We're still doing about $100,000 a week right now when we just reopened, which is very good numbers for us right now. But when we can't get a lot of product, as I think Todd said, that factories are shut down, whether it's in Kentucky or across the country. We're having a hard time finding our product that we've been always very easily able to get for the past 3.5 years. And now we're running into not being able to find the product and trying to switch our product to make sure that we don't have the product we're selling to our guests that is subpar, So if we can't get the product that we want, we're having to just not have that set for our guests. And if you've been to Carson's, everything on our menu is pretty good. And anytime we run out of anything, people aren't so happy about it, but we're just doing everything we can. And we're just happy to be at 33%, seeing smiling faces in the restaurant again. Like Stacy mentioned, nothing worse than seeing a empty dining room in your restaurant. You want to see the people enjoying your drinks, enjoying your food. That's why the mass majority of us are in this industry, because we enjoy speaking with people from all around the world, seeing them drink their cocktails, especially being, in the bourbon capital, teaching people about bourbon that they've never heard of before, or et cetera, so it's been fun to say the least, I guess.
Yeah, it's been a couple years since my restaurant days, but I remember Saturday nights, it's a 2-hour wait, and to-goes are a small portion of your business. Having to divert to 100% to-goes, I have been impressed with restaurants pivoting, and I do not miss the to-go days. So I feel for you all. Do people seem ready to get back to visiting restaurants? Once it was announced that you could reopen even at the reduced capacity, did you feel like people were ready to get back in and ready to get back to a little bit of normalcy?
Absolutely. I mean, we posted when the governor mentioned, I think the day after, we posted on Facebook saying reservations open, and our phones were blowing off the hook. I wish we would have had 10 more phones to take reservations, but people are very excited to be out and about. They've been coming in grows. We have been full every single night. Again, with 33%, we have so many tables, so many bar seats, but the people are ready to be back out. We have, again, smiling faces in the restaurant again. They have thanked us time and time and time again for opening our doors, and because there's a lot of restaurants in Lexington that haven't yet. And there's a lot of reasons why they haven't, and that's up to them. But people in Lexington, at least, are ready to get back to normality of eating again and drinking again and seeing friends I haven't seen in a while, or just coming to the bar to have a drink for happy hour. People are definitely ready to get back out there and start eating and drinking again. And, I think they're excited about it.
Absolutely. So moving back to Todd, can you talk a little bit about employees returning to work and the process retailers are going through to protect their workers?
Yeah, sure. And before I do that, let me follow up on one of Kyle's comments about supply. We're hearing that as well. I think a lot of consumers the Joe consumer out there just thinks that food magically appears on the grocery store shelf or just magically appears on a restaurant plate when they go. And so I'm hoping this is a wake-up call to Kentuckians and Americans in general, that there's a whole supply chain on the backside of what you see every day. And it does take time to allow those products to go through those channels. And so, we're just asking everyone to have patience and give the distribution and supply chain some time to catch up. So I just wanted to make that comment about employees returning to work. Yeah, I think the retail industry, the retailers that have been closed, I think are taking a lot of the playbook from the retailers that have remained open. The ones that have been able to remain open have kind of struggled through and tried to figure out how to keep store associates safe and follow the CDC guidelines and the guidelines from the governor's office as far as PPE, hand sanitizing stations, masks or no masks, gloves. All those have come into play. Temperature screenings, whether you do that when they show up for their shift or before they come to work and do a self-screening, which is allowed. All those things are out there, and whatever that they would see on a normal trip to their grocery store, they're now having to implement in their own stores. But I will say this, and we fielded a lot of calls on what should I do here, what should I do there, and folks I've been really impressed at how thoughtful they've been in making sure that their store associates are safe when they come into work. And not only that, how do they reconfigure their store if they need to, and make sure that there's proper distance in the queue lines, and how do you display products? All those have come into play as well as they've set up what they're going to do when their employees come back online, and including phased in. Stacy mentioned the childcare issue. That has been a big issue as well as store associates have come back to work. The other thing that's been a little surprising is we've seen a lot of now hiring signs out there. Even with the high unemployment rate, folks are still hiring as they're coming back on. So that either means, well, coming into this with the low unemployment rate, a lot of them were short-staffed to begin with. And, you have to wonder how many folks have been asked to come back to work that maybe have refused to come back yet because of the unemployment benefits that they're drawing.
So on that same note, did you get the sense that employees were ready to return? Do you think people are still hesitant to come back, or a mix, or?
There's a mix, I think. I will say from the employer or the store owner, and I'm talking more from the independent store owner side, starting about the 1st of May, we'd get calls every week. When's the governor going to announce retail reopening? When can we reopen? We're ready to go back. We can do the job. We can maintain the requirements. We can comply. So I think the store owners were ready to get back. And I think by and large, we've heard a lot of positive stories about the employees also asking, when can I get back to work? Folks need to work. It makes them feel that they have a lot of responsibilities at work. It makes them feel needed. And, there are a lot of ancillary benefits besides just drawing the paycheck, right?
Sure, absolutely. So on the same subject of employees and workers, Stacy, what's your thought on the biggest obstacle in the restaurant industry bringing employees back? I know you mentioned childcare. Are you hearing from your members about these or other struggles? And if so, what are those?
Sure. Well, I think most of our operators did a really good job and are doing a good job for those who aren't open yet in remaining in constant communication with their team through all of this. A lot of them have had regular meetings, online or via conference call, just kind of making sure that everybody's in the loop, taking the pulse. A a lot of them have done trainings, I guess, during this time and worked on things together. So that's all good. But I think that, unemployment benefits are definitely a factor in some people not wanting to return. And I don't think that's always only the factor. I think it can be a multiple factor kind of issue. If you have someone in your household, or if your spouse or significant other is, is a frontline person, is a nurse or a first responder or someone, and they're constantly exposed, or maybe they're quarantined somewhere, right? So that they don't bring it home, then that puts more pressure on you. And if you're in our industry and maybe there's a child in the mix or children, there are so many different factors. So I think the message that I've gotten from our operators, most of them have just remained in contact with their team, and they know kind of who's phase one, who's ready to go, bring me back as soon as I can come. I'm there, whatever you want. And some of those people were the 2 or 3 that maybe helped them through with the curbside and carry out, right? And then there's kind of phase 2. It's like, I'll come back when I need to, but for now I need to be home with my family, And then there's kind of phase 3, which, and maybe the phase isn't the right word, but group 3, that's kind of like, I'm not coming back anytime soon. I don't want to expose myself. I want to collect my benefits. And when that runs out, I'm ready. So, we were never, and probably never will be, fully staffed as an industry. It's just not something, especially in this time of low unemployment, before all of this started. And so we'll always be hiring. And like Todd said, there will always be, we're always looking for great members of our team. Very few restaurants would say, and I hear it occasionally, but very few would say, we're in a great spot, I'm not looking for anybody right now. They always want, that great talent, or, those people that have a passion for hospitality. So, a lot of them are hiring, and they want to just keep that door open so that they can bring good people into the mix and people that can be a positive for their team.
We've heard some great stories. One in particular that sticks out in my mind, he had a key employee that he went to and just had the conversation. Look, I'm going to have to cut your hours, or you can go on unemployment. You're probably better off going on unemployment, really, if you do the math. And the employee said, no, man, I'm with you. I'm going to stick with you. I'll take the reduced hours. And I think that'll pay big dividends for that person going forward with that business.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Winston, did you have to manage staff differently during the early weeks of the pandemic, and now that the new Healthy at Work requirements are in place? And what was the biggest challenge for you complying with those new requirements, if so?
Yes, we of course had to make adjustments right off the bat when all of this news broke. We have a separate office building from our warehouse, so that's where there's a lot more people in close quarters, so that was a little more difficult. We tried to get as many people as we could to work from home, and then others just having to stay apart. We have a lot of cubicles and offices, so just trying to keep people at their desk and stay away from each other. That's a hard thing to do when they're used to getting up and walking around. But in the warehouse, it was not as difficult. For the actual workers who are moving all of the product, they are rarely next to one another on a normal day, so this was not too difficult. The problem comes when it's break time and you have a break room that is only so large. So that was a very big obstacle we had to overcome, as far as having guys go out to their car to take a break, or only a couple of them in the break room at a time. And, when they're ready to take a break and they're hungry, it's difficult to have them, say, oh, no, you can't go in there. The break room is at capacity. You got to find somewhere else. So that was a challenge. And then, of course, we have the issue of the truck drivers that are, we have a group that are making deliveries that we employ. And then we have another group that are coming in, bringing product to the warehouse. And other than the healthcare industry, of course, those are the true heroes in all of this. if you want to pat somebody on the back or wave at them, that's a truck driver. They do a tremendous amount of work, and there is nothing that you eat unless you go to the farmer's market every day that hasn't been on a truck. And those guys, and I say guys, I'm generalizing, they are scared. Here now, a lot of the truck stops have closed their restaurants or they can't come in. I don't let outside drivers come into my warehouse. They're having to live out of their truck, which is harder than you might think. And they've done an outstanding job of bringing whatever product is available to us. So there's a lot of people who've done a great job in this whole tragic time that we're in, and truck drivers are right at the top of my list. So otherwise, since we have been able to stay open, it's been just adapting from the very first moment that we learned of all this. So a lot of challenges, but as has been said before, you've got a lot of really hardworking, genuine people who want to do their best. And I think in the food industry, a lot of people have realized how important their job is and how dependent people are on the food chain. And so we've had a lot of people really go the extra mile and do really good things. So it's been a challenge again, and it's not going to slow down for a while. We still have the issues of staying apart and still trying to get our job done. But kudos to truck drivers. I will say that. Hats off.
Absolutely. Stacy, you mentioned earlier that, during this collective pause, we'll call it, that restaurants and the restaurant industry have been able to take some time to look deeper in their menu and maybe, realign some process and procedure. Additionally, a lot of them, as we've discussed, have turned to delivery and takeout to generate revenue during the shutdown prior to the phased reopening. There's discussion that this required a lot of restaurants to scale up their online and social media presence and maybe adapt some new technology. Do you see this or any other changes as a silver lining? Oh, you're muted, Stacy.
I'm sorry, there. I think so. Definitely operators, I think most operators would say that there are positive things that are coming out of the last few months that they've learned or that they've had time to deal with, things that they've changed, and even, before that May 22nd, for those that chose to reopen at 33%, I know a lot of them were pulling equipment out and rearranging the kitchen and, not just deep cleaning, of course, which they've been doing all along, but just evaluating what works best for their business. One of the operators that I drive past on my way to work every day, they're members of ours, and they're in Anchorage. He sent me a text picture of floors. He's like, we're just redoing our whole floor since I've got all the tables moved around anyway. And so I think, yes, all of those internal kind of things within the business, I think a lot of them have employed social media maybe more than they used to, or tried to step that up a little bit, knowing that all of us have been probably spending more time looking at social media, right? Because we've been limited in what we can do in our activities. But I haven't seen, I know some operators have gotten more involved with looking for an online solution, but I haven't seen as many as I thought I would that adopted a new platform. They've either maybe utilized part of their system that they already had that they hadn't really engaged before, or they've engaged more of the third-party delivery folks, that they really hadn't had a lot of interaction with in the past. But I think it's all positives that we'll take away, right? A lot to learn, as we can gear up and get more capacity, then I think we'll see a lot of the delivery and curbside just continue, because that's become a vital part of the operations, especially for those that maybe didn't have that much of a presence before. But it's become a key. I think you even said that, Kyle, that it's really become a key into being, you know, maybe not profitable, but getting you closer to where you need to be every day.
Kaylin, if I could add, I think another silver lining is that everywhere you go is cleaner than it has ever been. Not that any place was particularly dirty, a retail establishment or a restaurant or wherever, but now it's gone to a new level because every person who works there has a new understanding of what clean is and how important that is. So I think everywhere you go is now cleaner, which is of course a good thing. But and also, just I might throw in, people should be patient on some products. You know, cleaning products are in such high demand. We can't get them. Stores can't get them. You know, there's one factory in this country that makes Lysol, and almost all of that is going to healthcare facilities and whatnot. So don't be upset that you can't find Lysol. I can't get it, but it's just the level of cleanliness is, and I think that's a good thing. It's going to stay that way, and people just have a new appreciation for the word clean.
You're telling us you don't have a secret stash of Lysol. That's what you're saying.
No.
Well, and as somebody who's worked in food service the bulk of my life, the majority of my life, I can tell you the restrictions and the rules were already pretty stringent. And, you know, restaurants and retail and food service in Kentucky's always done a great job. But you are right. They have definitely stepped up their game. Kyle, you mentioned that you all had taken some steps when you were forced to temporarily change your business model. Do you think any of those will be permanent changes to the business at Carson's?
Yeah, I absolutely do think so. I mean, we never started to think about to-go order until this whole thing's happened. On a given Friday night when we were at full capacity, we would do anywhere between 5 to 10 orders. Never really affected the kitchen too much. It was just kind of the back burner. Now with everything going on, we've realized that a lot of people, even during all this, still don't want to go out. They still want to get curbside, take our food back home. And people with kids, it's hard to go out to dinner. So we started doing family meals. You know, we started doing family fillets and family pastas that you could just take home, already ready to eat. We've started doing what we've called Carson's Cuts, where we are selling our raw steaks with our chef seasoning and butter to take home and grill on a Saturday. And for Easter and Mother's Day and soon to be Father's Day, we were doing pretty much package deals for, take home dinners that only take you 20 minutes to cook. It's all prepared for you. It's all set up for you. So it's opened our eyes to a lot of different possibilities that we're able to continue to do. And we hope to do because, again, like I've said, it's the hospitality is about getting people in your doors and wowing them with food and drinks and talking and things like that. But if we can get our food to people's, houses with us doing curbside and feeding families on Easter so they don't have to worry about flooding the grocery store before 4th of July, we can sell them all of our cuts and they take them home and we give them instructions to kind of eat the Carson's way right at your house necessarily. So, and on the cleanliness thing, I mean, we were cleaning with toothbrushes from top to bottom, dusting things that have never been dusted before. And I agree with, Winston. I think we've realized how clean these places can really be. I've never seen grocery stores so clean, gas stations so clean. And, I think when it comes to handling food, we've all realized how important it is in the restaurant industry to keep your equipment clean and keeping your floors clean and washing your hands more than you really should. And all these things, they really do add up. And I think it's opened a lot of people's eyes on how clean we really can be. And, I told our owner when, we reopened at 33% after 3.5 years, a place is going to look brand new. And it does, we have brighter chandeliers, red paint everywhere. We've got a chance to do a lot of detailed cleaning that as busy as of a restaurant we are, we just don't really get a chance to do it as much as we can, and the staff has been wonderful coming in, just making a small hourly wage and helping us clean and taking apart everything from A to Z and re-cleaning everything like you're reopening for the first time. And that's what we did. So there's been a lot of, pros and cons of everything that's been happening, but I think we're going to come out of this with a lot more pros when it comes to everything that goes into the restaurant industry or anything that with cleanliness and appreciating your truck drivers that people don't think about. And, the food has to come from somewhere, it starts with the farmer, then the truck, and so forth. So as restaurants, we're the last stop, so there's a line of people that have done amazing work for us to help us stay open at our percent. I think they deserve more praise than everyone else that has been pushing through this whole thing.
Absolutely. And just a note for everybody, if you all have questions for any of the panelists, you can put that in the chat box and we will take those as they come in. So let us know what you are thinking. So Kyle, back to you again. We've talked a lot about the 33% capacity requirement in the Healthy at Work reopening for restaurants. And I think that's a conversation that everybody's having, not just restaurant owners and operators. How difficult is this particular requirement for you all at Carson's?
I mean, at the beginning, it was difficult. We had to go around with the tape measure, and even at 33% the night before, we had to remove tables around, tape measure, tape everything. We had to start monitoring when staff came in. In the morning, we have upwards of 18 people coming in when it comes to servers, bar cooks, everything, taking their temperature, asking the 3 CDC questions, making sure they're not sick, not feeling bad. Someone that has a cough, especially right now, they are very nervous, and we don't want them to feel nervous or be around other people because it might just be a common cough or it might be something worse. So it took us a little while, but we made it work, and we're lucky enough to have a very spacious patio, and lucky we've had some really good weather the past couple of weeks, and the city of Lexington has allowed a little bit further on sidewalk tables. So we've kind of expanded enough space as we possibly can to let as many people as we are. I would say the hardest part is the bar top. People that like to go to the bar, they just tend to want to sit by themselves or the group and kind of walk on in. And we've had to space that out to make sure we don't have crowds of people at the bar because we're just doing everything we can to make sure we keep our staff safe, to keep our guests safe, and just do everything we can. And when it comes to the possible 50%, I don't see that we want to be able to do that and still be able to stay 6 feet away, right? 6 feet to the to the dot almost with it 33%. So they gave us the go ahead to do the 50%. We wouldn't be able to do the 50% and stay 6 feet away. So unless they kind of go away from the 6 feet rule and do the 50%, that's possible, but I don't see it being possible to have more tables and also stay 6 feet away. So we've just done everything we can. And, every morning we get the tape measure back out and make sure no one moved any tables the night before.
Stacy, do you see a lot of your members tenting patios and parking lots to get more outdoor space?
I don't know about a lot, but I think a good number of them have expanded outside options because, especially smaller businesses, because inside is so limited. And like Kyle said, there's only so much you can do with that 6 feet. You can't just magically, invent areas in your restaurant that new people can sit. So we've seen, sidewalk usage, parking lot usage, tents going up. Cities have been great to work with. When this all kind of started, when right before they were allowed to go to 33%, we were contacted by several cities and had actual input into their language around, they're not going to permit charge or anything like that, but what does it need to look like, right? Because there's ABC regulations they have to comply with. There's all kinds of things that need to make sense, right, for it to not be a bad thing that they get in trouble for something. So a lot of operators have been really creative on how they can use whatever space they have. And I think those patios, much like the drive-through is for a quick service restaurant, patios are such a huge advantage for, or any kind of outside option for a sit-down restaurant. They've been great. And one other thing on the capacity question, because Kyle, you said it so well, when the healthy at work, before we had the healthy at work language and we had drafted our proposal did not mention capacity or a percentage of seating. It simply said, if distancing is used, that naturally takes care of seating. It naturally takes care of capacity, and it does it proportionately by the size of the restaurant, right? And so I had a couple of conversations with the governor's office trying to explain that you shouldn't do both, because when you do both, it's like two wrongs don't make a right. It doesn't add up any differently. It just limits what can happen. And so today marks 2 weeks at 33%. My campaign, the first of next week, is not going to be for 50%. It's going to be for 66, because if we started at 33, to me, it doesn't make much sense to go to 50. But I know it'll probably fall on deaf ears, right? But I'm going to push for more, and I'm going to push for that distancing to be shortened. I don't think that'll happen, but our members need somebody in their ear constantly advocating for what makes sense, right? I don't think they understand that when you look at a floor plan, just because you say a percentage capacity can increase, with the distancing in place, it just can't. Doesn't make sense unless you're in a very expansive operation. So that's next week. That's what we have on tap next week.
Well, the event industry appreciates you paving the way, because we're looking to the restaurant industry, especially since it's most similar to us, for capacity rules and guidelines and all of that, so that hopefully we can reopen soon as well, with plenty of space so that no one's too close. So talking about customers, there are certain requirements, again, regarding capacity, but a lot of these opening or reopening directives aimed at the public are just suggestions, like wearing masks. Todd, are you seeing retailers taking suggestions a step further, like requiring customers to wear masks, or how is that being handled?
Yeah, I think the masks suggestion, I guess, has been one that folks have struggled the most with. Very early on, the CDC said masks didn't do any good. And then now all of a sudden, as I guess they've gathered more information, now they're saying that masks do help in the control. The guidance does allow the retailer to have a store policy that they would not let customers in without a mask. I do know some stores that have adopted that policy. Enforcement becomes the key challenge when you implement that type of policy, and we've seen some incidents, and unfortunately at least one death in another state as those stores have tried to enforce that. So I think it's a mixed bag at this point. Certainly their employees are mandated, according to the guidance, to wear a mask during their shifts. We've seen about 50 to 60% compliance rate on the customers. Probably, depending on where you live and where you shop, it may be more or less. I tend to think in more rural areas. I live in a rural area. I'm not seeing as much compliance when I go out as I would when I go into a bigger city or a bigger town. And Stacy brought up a good point on what makes sense and the social distancing and store configurations and all that. A lot of this quite frankly, hasn't made a lot of sense. We asked for flexibility in our proposal as well. We asked for statewide guidance and enforcement, and unfortunately we did not get that. We've received a lot of conflicting messages and enforcement at the local level, which has caused a lot of challenges, especially among our chain operators that have stores in multiple towns across the state. And I think if nothing else, that's probably been more of a challenge, is just and the unlevel playing field that a lot of this has created. You have a soft goods store that's not been allowed to operate when a discount major retailer has been able to, and quite frankly, they sell a lot of the same goods that the small one would. And we represent both, just in full disclosure, and it's not been fair. So, and the governor made that statement too. He said, this pandemic or this disease picks winners or losers. Quite frankly, he made those decisions and we've not agreed with them all. We've just tried to figure out what the rules are, whether they make sense or not, and then tried to guide our members in trying to comply with them as best we can. So, you know, the mask issue, and a lot of folks too may have a medical condition that would not allow them to wear a mask. And so we've seen it's been interesting to see the consumer to consumer peer pressure out there that I think has been interesting. And we've said all along that the compliance is going to be self-compliance. And we're seeing that, you know, peer pressure compliance, sometimes to the extreme, which is unfortunate. But, you know, it's an interesting experiment in sociology that we're living through right now, I think, in a lot of ways.
Sure, absolutely. And a question just came in that says, are there any plans in place or in the works for reopening event facilities and start allowing events? And will that align with groups of 50 when we can meet? And there's a large group that's working, you know, to talk with the governor's office about reopening events, again, similar to the restaurant industry and some of their guidelines. You know, we feel like venues similar to restaurants, when you talk about capacity and or social distancing, we're in a good spot to similarly reopen. And lucky for us, we don't have POS stands and host stands and beverage stations, so we've got a little bit more space. But we're hoping we'll see some reopening guidelines similar to what restaurants and retail have been given. You know, 50 is a great count for a corporate event, maybe not so great for weddings. I think our clients are willing to adjust whatever the governor gives us, as long as it's not 10 people. And, you know, get back to safely reopening with the same sanitizing guidelines and safety protocols that everyone else has been given. So we're hoping to hear something soon on that, but we are working on it. But so far, nothing. I mean, events, you know, they signify not being socially distant. So we're working with our vendors to make sure that we're all on the same page with how that would work. And again, Stacy, we appreciate the work that you and the restaurants have done, because you all are paving the way for us. So thank you. Someone asked if it's a requirement that all restaurant employees wear a mask at all times. Stacy, is that a requirement?
Not really. I think it's a strong recommendation, but especially in the back of the house and kitchens where it gets very hot. Even when it's not warm outside, kitchens are really, really hot and hard to work in, right, Kyle? So, you know, one of the things that we went to bat for members on several weeks ago was restaurants' ability to allow face shields, you know, instead of a mask, where people might have respiratory issues or they just, you know, it's just uncomfortable in a kitchen setting. You know, as we were getting back that first little bit of time was that, you know, gosh, my guy's having to take breaks, you know, really frequently just to go outside, get some fresh air and take that mask off. You know, is there anything else we can do? So by and large, you'll see masked employees. You know, some use face coverings that are not technically masks. All of those things are just fine, and the health department's been really good, I think, to work with. Those local health inspectors really, you know, are the ones that have to interpret everything and follow up on complaints by consumers or, you know, anyone really. And so, yeah, I think they've done a good job of adopting what works best for them.
Sure. And let's see, we have another one. It's affected staffing. Any thoughts on future staffing for the hospitality field and for those entering the workforce?
Always lots of opportunities. Always. The door's almost always open, pretty much everywhere. Always looking for great assets to a team.
And I think it's probably too soon to see impacts of the pandemic on the economy. I know we've seen in Lexington and Central Kentucky, businesses in general, several that are announcing that they're either closing or they're not reopening, including some restaurants. But Stacy, do you think that this is a trend that we'll continue to see with restaurants permanently closing due to the pandemic?
Absolutely. And I think, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think we've seen a lot of closings so far. I think a lot of companies are going to try and limp through the summer, get through the fall when we can start having events and celebrating things, and and through the holidays when they can make a lot of money. But I think the first quarter of next year is going to be sad for a lot of businesses. And again, I hope I'm wrong. I really do. But it's like a giant hole that they're trying to dig out of. Most businesses won't be profitable this year. That's just a fact of life in our industry. So just trying to get to next year, pay all those bills, and a lot of them have brought on loan and debt. So I don't know. I don't think 2021 is going to be a pretty year. But then we have a lot of operators that are, like Phoenix rising from the ashes. And so I hope that they continue to employ whatever they need to, to get to the other side of this.
Sure. Todd, do you see the same with retailers?
Yeah, and we saw that during the Great Recession. It was about a year lag. We saw a lot of businesses try to hang on and make it through. They didn't make money that first year, and then that second year they finally had to bow out as far as the independents. From a larger perspective, you've all seen the headlines with some of the major soft line retailers, I guess, in that category that are struggling. A lot of them have gone into declared bankruptcies. Those, for the most part, I think they were limping into 2020 anyway. And I think it just expedited some of those bankruptcies that probably would have happened in about three to 5 years. So, that they'll reorganize. They're thinking through that very thoughtfully. And I think a lot of those will still be okay. They'll just be leaner and meaner going forward, which will be good for the retail industry in general.
Sure, absolutely. Well, I know there's a lot of additional topics on restaurants and retail, legal liability and with reopening, stimulus, payroll protection, economic, injury, disaster loans. And I know there's the things that everybody has thoughts and opinions on, but we are close to time. So any additional comments or thoughts from the panelists that you want to mention before we wrap things up?
I'll just mention real quick, we initiated an initiative called Shop Healthy KY with a hashtag Shop Healthy KY. We're encouraging all retailers and consumers to elicit that and use that in their social media as they're out shopping, or to post that for store owners and retailers to advertise and encourage what they're doing to keep their stores safe for consumers and store associates. So there's a lot of guidance on that website as well that I would encourage folks to go to.
One thing I would suggest for anyone, if you're unsure, you really want to go somewhere, but you're not really sure what their policies are, or do they have, patio, or, have they expanded any outside seating? Because I think that's a really great way for people to kind of dip their toe in the water right now. We know being outside is healthier, and the virus doesn't spread as much when we're outside. And it just feels good right now to be outside. But I would just suggest that anyone call ahead. If you really want to go to Carson's, but you're not sure what the policy is, check out their website. Give the staff a call and just ask those questions. And more than anything, restaurants want to take care of people. They, and you might not be able to see that smile under the mask, but the energy is there. They want people in those dining rooms and on those patios, and they want to be welcoming and give them something great to eat and drink. So if you have questions, just call and ask. Are you masking everybody? What if I need to use the restroom? How are you monitoring guest counts? Those kinds of things. And a lot of places that don't typically take reservations are taking reservations, so they can monitor all of that.
And especially in these times, please be patient, be kind, love your neighbor. We'll get through it.
Yeah.
And tip generously.
Tip generously.
Well, and I want to touch on what Stacy quickly kind of talked about being patient with it's that with the kitchen workers. I mean, it's hot in the kitchen without wearing a mask. Our kitchen's hitting almost 90 degrees with masks. They are doing everything they can, and we are having to take more breaks to make sure they're hydrated and drinking water, because it's, you know, it's downright miserable at times. So again, be patient. Everyone in the industry is doing everything they can to help each other, to get people in the doors, you know, not seeing the smiling face that you're used to seeing from your server or your bartender. Know that that's under there, that we can, to keep everyone safe, to keep everyone happy, and to keep everyone, you know, fed and have a good time at the same time. But I mentioned above, if you have any questions, just call the store, call the restaurant. You know, we're plenty of websites and online things are saying what they are able to do and what they're not able to do. And like you said, above all else, be patient and be kind to one another. We're all in this together, and I think just doing what we can right now. And, you know, I think we'll all be better for it at the end.
Stacy, Kyle, Todd, and Winston, thank you all for joining us today. And again, thank you for leading the way for everybody in the food service industry. There are some of us that are waiting patiently to get back, and we appreciate you guys kind of charting those waters. And thank you to the Kentucky Community and Technical College System and the Kentucky Chamber for hosting these webinars. You know, as a small business owner, I appreciate you all kind of leading the way for Kentucky with these reopenings. And I know that a lot of that is thanks to you and the hard work that you all are doing. So we very much appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks so much, Kaylin, to all our panelists. We really appreciate your valued insight. And as everyone has said here, we want you to stay safe, but we do want you to get out and support local businesses and eat and shop as much as you can. So if you missed part of today's discussion, we've been recording the webinar, so you'll be able to access it on our website a little later today. That's kychamber.com, where you'll find all sorts of resources, our Restart Kentucky page, including where and how to get tested, as well as our Who's Hiring page for those looking for new job opportunities. Also, I did want to mention we'll be hosting another webinar in a couple weeks, Tuesday, June 16th, which it'll be our Kentucky primary election preview with Senator Damon Thayer and Senator Morgan McGarvey. So stay tuned for that ahead of the primary election on June 23rd, and make sure you're registered to get out and vote. Thanks again to all our panelists and to all of those who've tuned in, and have a good weekend, everybody. Thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Bye.